The thing that I want everybody to understand is about making connections. And a lot of us are from different communities, different struggles and everything, but among all of us in our diversity, which is our strength, we all have connections. And one of the things that we find in our connections is that there are these people that seem to want everything. They will take our land, they'll take the land from a poor farmer, they'll take union rights from a worker, they'll steal land from the original people of this land. And they all do it for the same reason, to accumulate as much wealth as they possibly can. And we're all connected to that. Even now they're talking about cutting Social Security for our elders so that these super 1% rich people don't have to pay as much taxes and whatnot. It's all connected. And one of the things that they do is when a movement comes into existence that demands their rights, demands better conditions, they try to appease it a little bit, and then they try to turn all attention away from it, and it becomes invisible. They don't want you to know about it, because they realize that there is a power greater than they are, and that's the power and spirit of the people. When the American people learned about child labor, it got eliminated to a certain extent, and then it dropped off the radar. And that's what has been happening to all of us throughout the years here. Among the original people of this land, they fought for their land. The other side tried to demonize them. They always try to demonize anybody that wants to keep something instead of everything going to these few people. And then they declared that the Indian Wars were over, well, what they didn't explain that it wasn't wars where one side won and the other side surrendered. What had happened in this country is peace treaties were signed throughout this country. And these peace treaties guaranteed certain things. Well, unfortunately, the U.S. government did not keep their side of a single one of the peace treaties originally signed in this country. Not a single one of them. And I don't believe they ever attended to. What they wanted to do is create this document, and if original people seemed to fight back and go against that document, they were demonized for breaking the peace treaty. Now, the government could come in and rob the land like the Black Hills. That's not a violation. But if the Lakota people fought back for the Black Hills and their land, which by treaty was theirs, they were demonized as being these terrible people. Well, after the Wounded Knee Massacre, the government and the dominant culture put Native people into the forgotten people, the invisible people, the people that no longer exist in American view. They did this for one particular reason above anything else. When they created the reservations, they were thinking of land that ranchers wanted or the railroad wanted and stuff like that. We hadn't come into the 20th century with energy development yet. But then they discovered when they needed coal, uranium, oil, natural gas, and all this, that a lot of that existed on this land that they forced the original people on. So they wanted to get that. So they started a continuous policy of genocide, of ethnic cleansing. They would go into reservations, steal the kids from their homes, force them into boarding schools for years where they were robbed of their language, their culture, their hair, everything that had to do with their way of life, and the government tried to make them into obedient white servants. They outlawed their religion. In this country that was supposed to be based on freedom of religion, this is one of the few countries that has come out in degree and outlawed religion. Think about that. Think about where you're standing. I mean, if that process has continued, if St. Leo's did something that they didn't like, when they had outlawed St. Leo's, well, this is what they did to Native people. Outlawed their religion, their culture, everything. Then they went into termination policies, forced sterilization of women, and everything. So there was this whole period from Wounded Knee up until the 1960s, where Native people were invisible. The American people didn't realize what was going on, and this policy of outright genocide, ethnic cleansing, whatever you call it, was going on. If you wonder why the U.S. had refused for so long to sign the genocide proclamation of the UN, it's because the U.S. has been one of the greatest violators of that policy since its very beginning, because this is ethnic cleansing. Every time you step on any part of America, there's a history behind that, and usually a history of theft, usually a history of genocide. In the late 1960s, many Native people started to get more actively involved out in public. The fishing rights struggles up here, Fort Lawton, Cascadia, Big Mountain, and Wounded Knee. And what this did was, this put a media spotlight on the people and the things that the government wanted to remain invisible. Why was AIM such a threat to the American government? Because was AIM going to overthrow the U.S. military, FBI, all the police forces? No, they were a threat because they put a spotlight on what the U.S. has been doing. Now, the U.S. in their grand feeling of superiority decided that Native people could not govern their own affairs and made them wards of the state, of the Department of Interior and the Department of Bureau of Indian Affairs underneath that. So this U.S. government department that was supposed to look after all the affairs, particularly things like mineral rights, their land and everything, was supposed to look after it. Well, what happened was that opened up this land to outright theft. It opened up to energy companies who paid very low royalties, if they paid any royalties at all, to the nations. If you put together all the financial, economic background of this guardianship, the theft of land, and really look upon it as an economic scandal, this is the biggest economic scandal in the history of this country, and probably in terms of money larger than all the other economic scandals in the history of this country. That's what they didn't want people to know about. That's why they came down on AIM so hard, because they were afraid that if people started looking into what was going on, they'd see the truth. Now on Pine Ridge, they had another reason. Like I said, on a lot of reservation lands, there were things that they wanted, like the Western Shoshone, it was gold. Big Mountain, it's oil, uranium, and natural gas. Up on Pine Ridge, in the northwest corner of the reservation, they found high-grade uranium. They wanted to put it under the control of the Tennessee Valley Authority for production for nuclear power plants and nuclear weapons. But they didn't tell anybody about this. The reason they didn't tell anybody about this, and the reason why they didn't go negotiate with the Oglala people, was that they knew that the people on the land would not sell this land to them. Because The U.S. courts have declared that the United States stole the Black Hills, and the United States Congress has set aside money for this. Well, the Lakota people refuse to take money, even though somebody ought to point out that the money given to them is maybe 1% of the wealth that the mining companies stripped from the Black Hills, but regardless of that, they would not take any money from the Black Hills because they refuse to sell. If they refuse to sell the Black Hills that is not in their possession, do you think that they would surrender more land to the energy companies for money? Of course they wouldn't. So they took another tack. They decided to suppress the original people. A very corrupt tribal chairman got into office. He organized his goon squad, and they started to suppress the traditional people. It got so bad with his goon squad, and they call themselves goons, and the U.S. Marshals and the FBI's on Pine Ridge before Wounded Knee, that you go down to the main village of Pine Ridge up on the tribal building for sandbags with machine gun nests on them. And there are all kinds of heavily armed people there in case AIM was going to protest something. So a meeting was held, and the traditional people, after a recommendation by one of the strong elder women of the Lakota, that they go to Wounded Knee to take their stand. They had to take their stand. They were losing everything. They didn't have anything left to have taken from them. Nobody else was paying any attention to them at the time. Well, the 72-day occupation in Wounded Knee created a public international spotlight on treaty issues and that the original people were still here and they still wanted their rights and justice and their own way of existing. The government said, well, if you put down your arms, we will have congressional hearings on treaty rights. So is that what the government did when they finally put down their arms at Wounded Knee and gave up? No. There were no such hearings in Washington. And what they did is that they arrested over 500 AIM members. That was far more than any AIM members were at Wounded Knee. And every AIM member that they could find, they arrested on some trump-up charge. Most of the time they were found not guilty because there was no basis of charge. The idea was to put AIM in the courts and suffocate AIM under the legal system. And the leadership trial out of Wounded Knee, the conservative judge, this was not some liberal judge, the conservative judge got so angry at government corruption and misuse of the Constitution and everything that threw the charges out. Said, well, I'm not putting up with any of this. Well, between Wounded Knee and the incident that happened that Leonard was involved in was what the people at Pine Ridge call the Reign of Terror. Not only was AIM suffocated in the legal system, but all the traditional people and supporters of AIM and Wounded Knee, they were killing them. There were over 66 murders in 2.5 years. People were run off the roads. Whole villages were shot up. It was something like you would read in maybe El Salvador or something like, well, it was happening here. And nobody was seen and because the press had left after Wounded Knee. Well, the traditional people went back to AIM and asked for help. We need some sort of protection. We're being killed. We have children that are being shot, for God's sake. So AIM came back to Pine Ridge, and most of the people that came at that second time were from Northwest AIM, from here. Among the people that came was Leonard Peltier. The two original defendants were from Oregon. The one Native person killed that day, Joseph Stunt, was from Port Angeles. Most of these people were all from where we live. They in a sense, are our people that took a stand there. Well, the government still wanted that uranium. On the exact time that section of the Pine Ridge Reservation was being signed over to the U.S. government is when the event at the Jumping Bull compound that led to Leonard's arrest and everything occurred at the exact same time. What it was is the government said they did not want another wounded knee that would cause a spotlight. They did not want to negotiate with people, talk with people. They wanted to come in there, create a situation that they basically could wipe those people out that aid encampment off the face of the earth. How do we know this? That was a setup. First off, their excuse for coming into the encampment, they said they were looking for a young native boy who supposedly, in a drunken fight, had stolen a pair of used cowboy boots. Now, that doesn't really come under the FBI's jurisdiction on native land, and certainly isn't worth a wanted poster on the 10 most wanted or any huge priority. But the FBI showed 2 agents who were not ordinary FBI agents. These 2 agents were counterintelligence FBI agents and part of the FBI SWAT team. They were the elite of the FBI. Well, that suit supposedly was hunting down Jimmy Eagle. They were in the nearby village of Olama at the time when they saw a red pickup truck go out of the village. And they somehow decided that Jimmy Eagle could be in the truck. Instead of stopping this truck out on the highway, which would be very easy to do, that truck would go very fast. The FBI cars would drive ring around it. They followed that truck until that truck pulled into the encampment. Then they sped up, pulled into the encampment in a defensive position, and came out with their guns drawn. The other way that we know how what happened was set up is before all that happened, all the roads leading into the area were blockaded. You couldn't get into the area unless you were FBI or U.S. Marshals or whatnot. And the other way that we know that Dennis Banks found out later was that all the nearby hospitals had been warned to expect casualties that day, and that was before anything happened. So they pull up, they wanted to create a firefight, and they did it in the same way that a lot of the drive-by shootings had occurred at Pine Ridge. Cars come up, guys jump out of the guns and start shooting. That's the way it had been happening. So the young people there were there to defend the people. That was their job. They had no choice. There was no other tactic to use when you're facing down a gun and being shot at. So they defended themselves. Now,
do you think you could not use that thing?
Not use this at all?
It's very hard for me.
Okay.
I don't know what other people think. Let's try that. I'll turn it on. Thank you.
I generally speak loud enough. Anyway. The first trial of the first 2 AIM members that came out of the situation, they were tried in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which basically is a mid-America, mostly all-white farming city. And they presented the case. There was nothing special. Matter of fact, the other side tried to intimidate them by keep telling them that AIM was plotting to overthrow the city or capture them or do acts of terrorism, which never happened, to scare them. And that jury found those 2 members, Dino Butler and Bob Robertson, not guilty for reason of self-defense. It was funny, in an interview afterward, the foreperson of the jury was talking about how the FBI was trying to scare them about AIM, and he said, if anything, with this verdict, I would have been scared of the FBI. So the government decided to put all their weight on Leonard Peltier. Well, he was captured up in Canada, probably from an informant that we know about up there. And the first thing U.S. did, we're supposed to be friendly countries, right? Well, they sent these affidavits to Canada, 3 of them, that were testimony of a woman by the name of Myrtle Corbear, saying that she saw the whole thing happen. In fact, she wasn't even there that day, but they grabbed her with a motor woman, told her she'd never see her kids again, intimidated her, so she signed these statements for them. And they finally released her. As soon as she was released, she went to Leonard's defense committee and asked to testify. Leonard's defense committee tried to have her testify in court, and the judge refused to allow her to testify. He said, if this woman is to be believed, it would shock the conscience of the court. Now, can you understand the meaning of such a ruling in somebody's trial, saying that you have a witness that could blow the whole thing open and shock the conscience of the jury, so we're not going to allow that person to testify? They refused to allow Leonard any testimony about self-defense, about the conditions of Pine Ridge. They fabricated the ballistics report to show that the cartridge came from Leonard's